Hello, in this video I'm going to talk to you about Wittner Finetune pegs. These pegs are a great idea, a great invention, and they basically, they have two great advantages. The first one, the major one, is that because they are a geared peg, they have a gear ratio of 8.5 to 1, which means that for every 8.5 turns of the peg head, the shaft turns once, and that allows you to tune very accurately with any type of string. And for the synthetics and the metal chord strings, you don't need fine tuners. You can do away with those even on the E string of a violin if you wish. The other great advantage of these pegs is that when they're fitted, they have no moving part on the instrument itself, so they're fixed securely in place. And the part of the peg shaft that moves is just in the central section where the string is wound on. So the peg doesn't wear the instrument at all, and once it's installed properly, it should just stay put for as long as you want it. This one actually is a cello peg. I'm just using that because it's bigger and you can see it more clearly. A couple of interesting features on the peg itself. This is very important when you come to fit them if you're planning to do it yourself. Personally, I would recommend that you've got an instrument maker or restorer to do it for you, someone with experience. We'll show you later how they're fitted anyway, and if you do plan to do it yourself, there's just a couple of things to bear in mind. So the shaft itself, the part that moves and that the string is wound around here, this central part, is actually slightly smaller in diameter than the section that fits to the instrument, so there's a little ridge. I'm just tapping that with my rule there. Now when the peg is fitted into the instrument, it's very important that this fixed section doesn't extend into the peg box, because if it does, the string can actually wind against it and get caught up. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but basically the moving roller winds the string and it can wind itself into this fixed section, and that can cause the string to jam a little bit and make it harder to turn. So we'll talk about that a bit more when I actually fit one of these pegs into a violin in a few moments. Apart from that, the only other thing to mention is that the peg has two holes for the strings, one and there, and that basically allows you to wind the individual strings, the different notes, in the right place. So on this one, the cello one, one of the holes in the peg is actually a little bit smaller. That one's for the A and the D strings, and then the bigger hole is for the two lower strings, the G and C, which because they're bigger diameter, they'll take up more space on the shaft, so it needs a little bit more space. Now when you're choosing which peg to buy, it's very important that there's enough fitting material in the peg box of the instrument for the peg that you buy. Obviously you want the smallest peg that will go into the instrument, because that involves removing the littlest amount of material from the instrument itself. So I'll just get a violin down. Okay, so we've got this old instrument here. It's got some pretty old pegs, and we need to decide which size Wittner Finetune peg that you need. So the easiest way to do this is with a vernier caliper, and you just take the caliper, or take that G peg out. So we'll use the D as an example. So you measure the diameter of the existing peg up against the peg box like that. It's close, right up against the peg box wall. And this one is just over 7. It's 7.5, I suppose, to be exact. So there's two issues to bear in mind. The taper of the peg holes in an instrument can vary, especially with old ones. Often they're steeper than a modern reamer. So before you can put the new peg in, the taper has to be at 130, which is the taper of the Finetune peg, and the hole itself has to be perfectly round, and of course the right size to locate the peg in the correct position. So if I just take that old peg out for the moment, so we had a measurement there of 7.5. Now the pegs come in two sizes: the slim one, which is 7.8 in diameter at the measuring point, and larger size 8.6. Now our hole is 7.8 on the outer wall there, so in this case we're going to need the bigger peg, the 8.6, to give enough fitting room. So I'll just take it out. Okay, so there's the peg out of the packet. It's extra long, of course, to allow for fitting. So the reamer that you will need, and if you haven't got one of these, you will not be able to fit these pegs accurately or correctly. So this is a 1 in 30 taper reamer, the same as the peg. So I'm just going to, so as you can see there, there's plenty of fitting room there for this peg. Now if we were to put the smaller one in, just as an example, so this is the slim one, the 7.8, and as you can see, now that one, if I push, it'll keep going in, and that might look as though there's plenty of space there, but if we check with the reamer, so I can immediately tell that the taper in the instrument is different. So I've got to correct that taper before I can fit the peg. Now if I start to do that, the slimmer peg, now it's starting to go quite a way in. And the taper is still hasn't been corrected, so there's no way that this smaller peg will go into this hole. And in actual fact, in practice, you'll find almost in every case that if the pegs are going to be fitted to an older instrument, you will need the larger size peg. The smaller ones are really only designed to go into either brand new instruments which never had pegs fitted, so the hole can be sized exactly, or if it is an old instrument, the peg holes will need to have been bushed. That's filling in the peg hole and effectively starting again with new holes. So as I say, in this one we're going to fit the bigger peg. So I'm going to carry on just correcting this taper. Take that old E-peg out, it's just getting in the way. It's still not correct. In fact, I'm only taking material from the outer wall of the peg boxes. Right, it's now okay. So we've got right. So now I can feel that I've got the correct taper. Now the tricky bit now, of course, is that you have to make the hole in the peg box the same size as the peg, which is the exact reverse of a traditionally fitted wooden peg, where you keep the hole in the instrument, the peg hole, as small as possible, and you fit the peg to the hole. In other words, you turn down the peg, you make the peg smaller to fit the hole. Whereas with this system, the size of the peg is fixed, so you have to make the hole as big as is necessary to take the peg. So we just keep turning. Now, the 132 is quite a shallow taper, so you have to be careful because you can push these pegs beyond the point. And if you put them in too far, then you're done. You've got to you're then faced with bushing the peg hole, starting afresh. So it's best just to go quite cautiously. Now when you take the peg out, you have to just be careful. When you take the peg out of the peg box as you're fitting, don't pull on the head, because if you pull too hard, you can actually pull the cover of the peg off and expose the gears inside. Right, now you see there it just popped further in, so on this go it went in quite a bit further, and now I'm just going to start to push quite hard. Now the secret of these pegs successfully fitting them is that they have to be fitted very tight, very tight. If they're not fitted tight enough, it is possible over a period of time for the tension on the string to actually pull the peg loose, and it will start to turn in the peg box. And once you get to that situation, you've got a problem, because you can't just push the peg in and make it tighter. It won't do that. It'll just push on through, and the peg will continue to unwind. So I'm just going to get my little hammer here. So what I do with these is, when I'm fitting and I want the peg out in this situation, I just give a little tap, and that loosens it, and it pops out nice and easily. So we're getting to the business end of it now, so we've got to be quite careful. Just a little bit at a time. Pop it in. Okay. A little bit more. Right, now it's now beginning to hold just here. What we have to do now is to line up the moving part of the shaft that the string winds around exactly with the inside wall of the peg box. So what I'm looking at here is the moving part of the shaft is now starting to come towards the middle of the peg box, but part of it is still within the wall of the peg box, so we just need to go a little bit further. Right, so I'm pushing quite hard now, and I'm looking to get to the stage where the ridge is just in line, and then push. Okay, so I'm just there now in actual fact. So the next stage is to cut off the excess on the outside, and I just mark it with a pencil, like so, and then remove the peg. And then to finish the peg, I cut the excess off, file a dome, nice bit of sandpaper. So I'm not going to do that because that's a brand new peg and I don't want to ruin it. So I'll just show you with this old wooden one how I do that at the end. So it's cut off. Just use one of my files to create a nice dome. And then with sandpaper, I simply get that nice and smooth and even. And with the finer paper, like so. And that's nice and shiny. Now this one, the cello one's already been done. This has come out of a cello that this peg was fitted to. So you can see, and again, the plastic can be smoothed with this special paper that I use. Okay, so that's really it in a nutshell. So the peg goes in and it is pushed and pushed and pushed really tight as you can get it, so that the little ridge I talked about here is exactly in line with the inner wall of the peg box, so that the rotating part of the shaft goes right up to the peg box, and then you can wind the string around. So as we turn, the inner shaft goes round. And that's it, really. So I hope you find that interesting and helpful. If you've got any queries about the use and fitting of these pegs, please do feel free to contact us or make a comment on the video, and we'll try and answer any questions that you may have. Okay, so thanks very much for watching. Bye.